I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Sarah Dyke.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful for having secured this debate today on the Government's response to flooding as a result of Storm Chandra. Madam Deputy Speaker, before I begin, I want to pay tribute to the hard work and dedication of everyone involved in the flood effort after Storm Chandra in Somerset. I would also like to take a moment to recognise the impact that flooding has on people's mental health. Victims of repeated flooding describe living in a permanent state of anxiety, and this has been palpable when hearing from residents across the Glastonbury and Somerton constituency over the last few weeks. There's been a feeling of déjà vu and, oh, here we go again. Because between the 26th and 27th of January, Storm Chandra, hot on the heels of Storms Goretti and Ingrid, brought exceptional rainfall to Somerset. 50 millimetres of intense rainfall fell across large parts of Somerset, causing widespread flooding and set new 24-hour rainfall records in many parts of the southwest. Somerset Council acted swiftly and declared a major incident as 50 homes across the county fell victim to floodwater, and the major incident remains in place following persistent rain over the following 2 weeks. Yet, with more rain in the forecast and high spring tides imminent, because the ground is fully saturated, local rivers are highly sensitive to further rainfall, while 5 flood warnings and 11 flood alerts remain in place across Somerset. Roads are still flooded and communities are cut off. Madam Deputy Speaker, this is not an issue that will disappear on its own accord. Climate change pushes the extremes, and Somerset, so often at the forefront of climate change, will see further extreme weather, with prolonged droughts and intense rainfall becoming common. The Environment Agency projects that there will be a 90% increase in properties at risk from river and coastal flooding, alongside an increase in surface water flood risk by the 2080s. Physical damage alone is estimated at £2.4 billion annually and could rise to £3.6 billion annually by 2050. While insurers are set to pay out a £1.6 billion for weather-related property claims made last year alone, as the UK battles with the impact of climate change. So the government response to flooding incidents like Storm Chandra must not just focus on helping communities currently dealing with flooding water, but how we can better protect communities and help them be more resilient in the future. Madam Deputy Speaker, building flood-resilient communities is desperately important, and it must be a priority, because these events are getting more frequent and more serious. Now, before I move on, I would like to reflect on what we really mean when we discuss resilience. Constituents in Glastonbury and Somerton are dealing with flooding with ever more regularity. Louise, who owns Gingerfred Dance Studio in Langport, told me that while she continues to battle the floodwater lapping up against her dance studio floor for the last 2 weeks, and despite questioning if she may have to move her studio, which she has been running for 14 years now, and that's been some hard graft, but she's absolutely determined to fight on. But she wants to fight on, but she also wants to learn how she can better understand flooding, be resilient to it, and help to protect other businesses as well. And by doing that, help her community. Yes, of course I will.
Madam Deputy Speaker, first of all, can I commend the Honourable Lady for Glastonbury and Somerton for bringing this forward. I say this very respectfully. The Honourable Lady, in the time that she's been here and the friendship that we have with each other over the last few years, is one that I appreciate very, very much. But also, the Honourable Lady has been assiduous and hard-working on behalf of her constituents, and tonight is an example of that. The Honourable Lady will not be aware of her house, but the storm hit Northern Ireland with ferocity and our schools had to close. The aftermath, however, was the loss of even more trees that had taken a hammering and an unending list of named storms. That naturally impacts upon our natural flood defences, and this has been very clear in the aftermath of Storm Chandra. Does the Honourable Lady not agree that natural flood defences need to be shored up, or we will create an unsolvable problem for the very near future? Thank you.
Thank you, and I thank the Honourable Gentleman for his kind words, but also for his intervention. Indeed, nature-based solutions, natural flood defences are absolutely important. I will come on to that later in my speech, and I know the Minister also is an advocate of that as well. Madam Deputy Speaker, in this place, I have advocated for communities to receive support they need to develop their own bespoke extreme weather resilience plans. And I pay tribute to the tireless work done by people such as Flood Mary in helping victims of flooding and raising awareness of flood risk and property flood resilience. Madam Deputy Speaker, communities who regularly suffer flooding are resilient, but they deserve action and they deserve investment, because flood resilience in Somerset cannot be achieved on a shoestring budget, and people deserve better. The Prime Minister has spoken about national security for national renewal, and we must remember that resilience to flooding is part of our national security. I would like to thank the Minister for joining me in Glastonbury and Somerton yesterday. We visited Langport, Thorney and also Drayton to see the impact that Storm Chandra has had on the area. And I'm sure she would agree that after hearing from the farmer Mike Curtis, who took us on his tractor and showed us some of his land, that Somerset communities are resilient, but much more must be done to protect them from flooding. And if flooding does happen, they have the tools then on hand and the support in place to help their communities mitigate. Yes, of course I will.
I'm extremely grateful and congratulate my honourable friend on securing this important debate and on the amazing work she does on her side, the levels and moors that we share, that span across our two constituencies, and I hope I do similar work on my side of the levels. Would she agree with me that one of the messages, and she may well be coming on to it in any event, one of the messages I hear most strongly from residents in Staithe and Boroughbridge, some of them have water lapping up against their house right now as we sit in this chamber, and are frightened about what's going to happen tomorrow and the next day, especially with a long forecast of rain. Would she agree that one of the key things they ask for is better communication, so that they have as maximum information about what's happening with the levels, when the pumping is going to start, when it's not going to start, as well as, of course, a long-term plan that's needed after this flooding event to reduce flooding?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. I absolutely wholeheartedly agree. Obviously, every flooding incident is different. Sometimes it is difficult to dictate where those flood incidents are going to happen. But I certainly think there's a lot more that we can do. And the Minister and I had talked about the trigger points with the Environment Agency yesterday. And certainly that, I know, is something that they've committed to looking at. But I also agree that communication with local authorities and that collaborative and joined-up approach should be better. I also feel that we should, as communities, have better real-time information on flooding. And there's a really good example of that on the Cam catchment, where flood monitors have been put on bridges so we can see, an app tracks the flow of water, so communities within that catchment are then aware of any significant increase in the water levels. And I would hope that that is something that can be rolled out so that our communities can be better protected and also better protect themselves in these incidences of terrific rainfall. Yes, I will, of course.
Thank you for taking the intervention, and you're making the Honourable Lady's making an exceptional speech. There was an excellent debate today, this afternoon, in Westminster Hall with thoughtful contributions from a number of members on tree planting. And does my Honourable friend agree that tree planting is essential not just to biodiversity, to lowering temperature, to carbon capture, but also very important in terms of preventing flooding?
I thank the Honourable Lady for her intervention. In a previous life before being elected here, I was lead member for climate change and environment at Somerset Council. Somerset has a lower than average tree canopy cover, 8% compared to the national average of 14%. And we committed in our 10-year tree strategy to plant more trees. And in fact, there's lots of community groups across Somerset, reimagining the levels, who bring together volunteer networks to plant trees. I was out on Ham Hill just a couple of months ago, planting 3,000 trees for exactly that, to help for those to become established so they can soak in more moisture and play their part in slowing the flow through those catchment areas. So I wholeheartedly agree. But Madam Deputy Speaker, the Environmental Audit Committee report into flood resilience stated that the UK is not on track to be fully flood resilient by the time the Flood Re programme ends in 2039. Their report stated that without clear standards, flood resilience is just a vague ambition rather than a deliverable goal. So I would appreciate the Minister's comments on how what she means when she talks about resilience, especially at community level. And for communities who have spent time and money putting in place property level mitigations, but still flood, how can they better understand what it means to be flood resilient? Madam Deputy Speaker, the memories of the devastating 2013-14 floods are still painfully vivid in the minds of those that have experienced it. Following these floods, the Environment Agency carried out what was, at the time, the single largest pumping operation ever undertaken in Somerset. And following flooding in January 2023, the EA once again put in place another large temporary pumping operation in its history on the levels and moors. Yes, of course I will.
I thank my honourable friend for giving way, and I thank her for obtaining this essential debate. Talking of 2014 reminds me of the previous great storm in Dawlish that took out the railway lines. Now, the three storms that we've had in January in quick succession, as we did last January, does appear to be more of a habit now, and it seems to be something we can expect every year. Would my honourable friend agree with me that we actually need more government funds that we can call upon to clear up areas after these devastating storms when they hit so hard in some areas, as they have done in Dawlish and Teignmouth in these recent storms in January?
I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. I couldn't agree more. Mitigation, resilience, protection, but also supporting our communities through the aftermath is absolutely crucial, and I thank him for that comment. Madam Deputy Speaker, while it is yet to be confirmed, it looks like this ongoing pumping operation this year will once again supersede the predecessors that I spoke about. So what does this tell us about flooding in Somerset? Despite the government's claim that they are investing a record £10.5 billion in flood defences, the reality is that the problems are critical now and they continue to grow. While analysis by Flood People UK shows that capital spending commitment is at a lower annual rate than the previous capital regime, Madam Deputy Speaker, in Somerset we need action and investment to ensure the availability of critical assets when they are needed in emergencies to mitigate flooding, because every £1 spent by the government prevents £5 in damages, including £2 in direct savings to the Exchequer. And yet national flooding budgets have been cut in real terms. So it's crucial that this government invests in cost-effective strategies that include flood preparedness, prevention, traditional flood defences alongside nature-based solutions. So communities like those in Somerset and my honourable friend's constituency aren't left to fend for themselves. Yet at-flood risk communities have long felt abandoned by government and its agencies, with the recent decision to withdraw main river maintenance owing to EA funding shortfalls being a clear example of this. With no consultation, riparian owners in Somerset were issued with withdrawal notices last summer, leaving them with the responsibility to undertake maintenance work alone, a decision that has rightly heightened anxieties over further flood risks, because appropriate maintenance of main rivers reduces the likelihood that channel capacity will be exceeded or assets will fail. So the likelihood, extent, depth, duration and damage caused by flooding is then significantly reduced. Madam Deputy Speaker, we do not need to go back very far to understand the profound impact that this can have. Leading up to 2012, main river maintenance reduced over several years, and what followed was a catastrophic flood in 2012, and then, of course, the extreme flood during the winter of 2013. It has been evidence that if regular main river maintenance has been undertaken, these events would have much less impact. This is why the Liberal Democrats are calling for an urgent review of the decision to effectively abandon main river maintenance. We're also calling for a further £5.3 billion of investment to ensure that flood defences are built quickly and provided to all necessary communities to increase local preparedness and resilience. It's in doubt that the cost of defence and resilience is significant, but the cost of getting this wrong or doing nothing is far greater. £6.1 billion in GVA has been lost from downward pressure as a result of flooding in the last 5 to 10 years. So given that 1 in 4 properties nationally and an additional 1,500 in Glastonbury and Somerton alone will be at flood risk by 2050, the costs will only rise. This scenario also opens up a broader question of communication and how different bodies, be it government, DEFRA, the EA, internal drainage boards, the SRA, Somerset Council, communities and individuals work together. In the meantime, many riparian owners are confused about what their responsibilities are, and more must still be done to improve communication and understanding, because this lack of clarity is causing frustration and yet further anxiety. Now, I was pleased that the Minister also found time to meet with the Somerset Internal Drainage Board with me yesterday. They have called for a collaborative approach, but this must be backed with an appropriate local and national funding to move it forward, and this approach must be sustainable. Of course, any change will take time to implement, so it is paramount that the necessary main river maintenance works continue until alternative solutions are in place. And alongside ensuring dredging and regular maintenance takes place, I would also like to highlight the importance of natural flood management and what it must do to play its part in making Somerset more resilient to flooding. Now, I'm aware that the Minister shares my appreciation for such solutions, but as the EAC report made clear, these interventions remain undervalued and underutilised in England and must take their place alongside hard engineering projects. The urgent need to build more homes has led to more than 7,000 new homes in England with full or conditional approval planning permission on previously undeveloped floodplain land. Now, I'm clear that new developments should not be built on floodplains because they increase the speed of runoff and the risk of flooding downstream, putting homes and communities at risk. But for Somerset to hit the government's house building targets, the question must be, while we desperately need new homes, where do these houses go? Surface water flooding is the fastest accelerating risk affecting areas of the country that are not traditionally expected to flood. Liberal Democrats have led calls to ensure that where necessary, new homes are built with a range of measures to enhance their flood resilience and sustainable urban drainage systems that do their job and are maintained properly, and that older homes should be retrofitted to help mitigate against flooding. Madam Deputy Speaker, I'd like to pay credit to my constituent Tim Adams, the flood warden for Blackford, in Blackford just outside of Wincanton. And Tim has undertaken research on the rapid runoff of surface water from the A303, which has often been recognised to materially increase flood risk. His work has shown how attenuation ponds or wetlands could reduce peak flows, improve water quality and deliver biodiversity gains. So it is my view that it is essential to utilise citizen science, local knowledge and natural flood management techniques in a catchment area approach to flood mitigation. Because recognising this is key, but what is also key is recognising the role that farmers play in flood management. By storing flood water on their land to protect those downstream and building natural flood defences must also be considered, because 58% of Grade 1 agricultural land is situated on a floodplain, while 9% is at high risk of coastal flooding. Now, without appropriate insurance in place to compensate farmers as they hold water on their land to prevent those wider communities flooding, puts these businesses under increased financial pressure after each and every flood event. Now, yesterday, Mike Curtis told me and the Minister that he has reared cattle in Thorney for over 30 years. His herd peaking at 750 head of beef 10 years ago, but he now keeps less than half this number because his land spends so much time underwater. Now, whilst Mike's land saves thousands of homes downstream from flooding, he is unable to access any government support to compensate these losses to his business. And sadly, Mike is not alone in facing this, because Trish and Ron from Binham City Farm near Knoll also currently have hundreds of acres underwater and will run short of feed for their dairy herd before they're able to turn their cattle out this year, having massive and catastrophic ongoing impacts on their business. So this is why farmers who store water on their land to protect housing or other critical infrastructure, who are providing a public good, should be properly recognised for doing so and compensated fairly. Liberal Democrats would tailor the qualifying criteria for the Farming Recovery Fund to reflect the realities of flooding for rural communities and for farmers, alongside raising the ELMS budget by £1 billion to support farmers in their transition to environmentally sustainable farming and recognising their key role in accepting and managing flood water. Madam Deputy Speaker, flood defences in Somerset cannot be run on a shoestring budget. We urgently need to ensure critical assets are available, in place and able to operate at capacity during flood events. We must utilise the multitude of flood defence techniques available to ensure our communities are resilient to future extreme weather events, because there is so much work to be done to ensure England has a strong framework that recognises the role of the multiple bodies and agencies that work together to make flood-resilient communities. So to conclude, Madam Deputy Speaker, as I began, flooding can have a profound impact on mental health, affecting individuals and communities long after water recedes. So we must always remember the very real and persistent anxiety that flood victims experience, and this must be central to future government support for at-risk flood communities.
Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for Glastonbury and Somerset for calling this debate and providing an opportunity for us to hear and discuss the steps this government have taken in advance and in response to Storm Chandra. Storm Chandra brought heavy and persistent rainfall to the United Kingdom between Monday the 26th and Tuesday the 27th of January. From many communities, particularly in the southwest, this succession of storms has felt relentless, a cycle of anxiety, disruption and uncertainty that has tested both infrastructure and resilience. During Storm Chandra, rain fell on ground that was already waterlogged. The consequences of this have been felt most acutely in Somerset and across the wider southwest, where the 3 severe flood warnings were issued, the highest category of alert, signifying a genuine danger to life. Thankfully, all 3 severe flood warnings were able to be lifted by the afternoon of Thursday, the 29th of January. However, the challenges have not ended, as I saw when I visited South West yesterday. In preparation, local resilience forums stood up their response arrangements, and local partners have worked side by side to support residents, sharing information, evacuating households at risk, pumping water, patrolling flooded areas and helping vulnerable people. The Environment Agency operated its Somerset Moors and Levels flood plans at full capacity, deploying pumps and managing flood storage areas around the clock. As river levels rose, local authorities led evacuations in Dorset and Somerset. Their professionalism and compassion have been vital to affected communities. Work is ongoing with around 300 flooded households to determine when homes can safely be re-entered. Nationally, DEFRA activated its Emergency Operations Centre to coordinate cross-government activities. The event...
I'm extremely grateful to Minister for that, and she's right to pay credit to the Environment Agency, who have rolled out pumps faster than ever before. But one of the key questions I get asked is, could we not have permanent pumps so that we don't lose 5 days bringing them down from Yorkshire? Apparently the crane that puts them on site and has to wait around 2 or 3 days costs £80,000 a day just to have it there. If we have permanent pumps, the pumping stations were last built in the 19th century. Surely it's time to have permanent installations. We could save a week, several days, and that could create space for millions of cubic metres of water.
Thank you, Honourable Gentleman. And yesterday, in the meeting that we had with the Internal Drainage Boards and the Environment Agency, one of the things the Environment Agency said is they would look at the costings around that, recognising the importance of it. But the events of the past few weeks have brought back memories of the catastrophic floods of 2013 and 14, when entire communities were cut off for weeks and livelihoods were deeply affected. My deepest sympathies go out to every individual, family and business affected by this flooding. For some, it's the first time they've faced this disruption, but for many of us, it is heartbreakingly familiar. And flooding is not just an inconvenience, it is a profound emotional and financial shock. It disrupts daily life, damages treasured possessions, and leaves people feeling vulnerable in their own homes. And I want those affected to know that we are committed to supporting them, not only in the immediate aftermath, but in the months and years ahead. As of this morning, the Environment Agency have reported that approximately 308 properties across England have been flooded, of which 16 have been in Somerset Levels and Moors. An estimated 22,850 properties have been protected by flood defences, and assets have stood up well, and the Environment Agency have not reported any issues or with reports of asset failure or that have resulted in flooding. But of course, the Department will be carrying out a post-event assessment with resilience partners to identify where are lessons that could be learned. And I want to take this opportunity to express my sincere gratitude to the first responders, Environment Agency staff, emergency services, local authorities and volunteers who've worked tirelessly to keep people safe. Their dedication, often in the most challenging and dangerous conditions, has been extraordinary. So although Storm Chandra has now passed, further rainfall has triggered Met Office yellow rain warnings across the southwest and other regions. We expect a sustained operational response to continue for several weeks on the Somerset Levels and elsewhere. This will involve an ongoing pumping operations, continued monitoring of river and groundwater levels, and close coordination between local authorities, emergency services and national agencies. Yesterday's visit to Somerset with the Honourable Member to see the situation firsthand was invaluable. We witnessed the extent of the flooding across the Somerset Moors and Levels, and we spoke with the Environment Agency staff, the local farmer Michael Curtis, the internal drainage members Rebecca Horsington from ADA, Ian Sturdy from Somerset, Somerset IDB Chief Executive, Tony Bradford, IDB Chair, and community representatives who are working tirelessly to protect homes, farmland and infrastructure. I saw the impact of the 16 days of incident response, villages cut off by flooded roads and the impact on people's mental health. I'm pleased to say, following my visit, the Environment Agency has committed to reviewing the issues around water level management in Somerset once this incident, of course, has come to an end. They'll be working closely with the internal drainage boards and the council as part of that wider recovery plan. That review will look at several important questions. When pumps should be activated, whether the current trigger points are right, and whether installing permanent pumps in certain locations could offer better value for money in the long term. I also want to acknowledge the vital contribution of Somerset Council, Devon and Somerset Fire and Rescue Services, the police ambulance services, the members of the IDBs and many others who have played an essential role in this multi-agency response. Flooding of this sort is always going to happen, but we can shape how prepared we are. The government is investing at least £10.5 billion by March 2036 to construct new flood and coastal erosion schemes and repair existing defences. This record investment is an average of £1.4 billion per year and increase on previous investment and will benefit nearly 900,000 properties. This includes a record £22.65 billion over 2024-25, I know what's coming, and 2025-26, building...
I beg to move that this House do now adjourn.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And as we were, we are taking this decisive action to halt the steady decline in the condition of flood defences seen under the previous government by shifting an extra £108 million into maintenance and repair of existing assets. We're also boosting the delivery of new defences by making available £140 million to 31 projects that are stalled because of funding gaps. In October, following consultation, we announced major changes to our flood and coastal erosion funding policy. These reforms will make it quicker and easier to deliver the right flood and coastal defences in the right place by simplifying our funding rules. The new funding policy will improve the balance of funding between building new projects and maintaining existing defences and will ensure that deprived communities continue to receive vital investment. will use government funding to unlock investment from public, private and charitable sources, making every pound of government investment go further. And we're going to invest at least 300 million into natural flood management over 10 years as a minimum, though I'm always keen for that to go higher. The highest figure to date for the floods programme. But these new funding rules we brought in for the new floods programme, so they start in April 2026 is when the new rules kick in this April. I saw once again the crucial role internal drainage boards play in these events. Our £91 million IDB fund supports greater flood resilience for farmers and rural communities. 94 IDBs are delivering projects that are already benefiting over 400,000 hectares of farmland and over 200,000 properties. The Environment Agency estimate that the fund will avoid around 10 billion in economic damage. A point. Yeah, of course.
I thank the Minister for giving way, and I deeply thank her and the member for Somerton and Glastonbury for highlighting what's been going on in Somerset, because it's dreadful. May I join you in thanking all of those who have responded. I very much welcome the moves that the Minister is talking about in terms of ensuring that we have in the EA money for maintaining assets as well as building new ones. My honourable friend earlier in her speech mentioned the importance of SUDS, Sustainable Urban Drainage Systems, and we had a debate on that in Westminster Hall just last week. In that debate, the Minister talked about ways of maintaining the SUDS. I was asking for SUDS to be a statutory responsibility to create the agencies as in Schedule 3 of the 2010 Water Act. The Minister was suggesting that there was a route by which Section 106 funding could be used to create permanent maintenance for these for SUDS. Might I ask the Minister as to how that could be achieved, given that Section 106 money is finite and limited?
Thank you, gentlemen. And I think the best answer to that is for me to get MHCLG, who are the responsible department for this, to give him a full answer on exactly how they can maintain this. Because I recall from the debate, one of the things they were looking at is this long-term maintenance of SUDS and how that can be achieved. But I'm mindful of the fact that that is another department's responsibility. Apologies all. So through the Internal Drainage Board Fund, we are further investing in resilient infrastructure that can withstand more frequent and intense storms, supporting communities with clear information, accessible resources and long-term recovery assistance, enhancing natural flood management, including restoring wetlands, which is brilliant, improving soil health and working with nature to slow the flow of water. So in April 2025, the Environment Agency proposed pausing main river maintenance in certain low-risk areas of Somerset. However, it became clear following a query raised by the Honourable Member for Glastonbury and Somerset in November 2025 that the initial process did not provide sufficient opportunities for engagement with local communities and stakeholders. As a result, a new consultation period is now open, running until April 2026. And this consultation will allow residents, landowners and local organisations to share their views and help shape the future of flood risk management in their area. I fully recognise the importance of flood risk maintenance, particularly in areas like Somerset, where the landscape and hydrology create unique challenges. DEFRA and the Environment Agency officials are already in discussion with key stakeholders, and this formed part of a wider conversation at December's Flood Resilience Task Force meeting that I chaired. These discussions are essential to ensuring that our approach to maintenance is fair, transparent and grounded in the needs of local communities. My letters to, apologies, I've not got the constituency here, I've just got the names, so sorry, Madam Deputy Chair. Sir Ashley Fox, in February, thank you, in February 2025, detailed the actions being undertaken in support of this. The Environment Agency needs to prioritise its funding rigorously, of course, and focus on its areas and activities that deliver the greatest overall benefits for people and property, including reducing flood risk and value for money. And they are spending significant resources every year in pumping and managing the Somerset levels. And their work is essential to maintaining that delicate balance of water across the landscape, supporting agriculture, protecting homes and preserving the unique ecology of the area.
For giving way, just a quick intervention. I'm really pleased that the consultation is open again. That will be good news for riparian owners across Somerset. But should the consultation come back and the riparian owners would then need to continue to do their own maintenance work, what support will be put in place for those that don't have the equipment or the wherewithal to be able to support that? And if we're looking at a holistic approach, if one riparian owner decides not to do any maintenance, what will then be the knock-on effects of that? And how do we then make sure that our network of rivers is resilient and doesn't flood other areas?
I recognise the challenge that the Honourable Lady is putting forward. I think for me the first step is let's see what the response to the consultation says, and then let's continue those conversations. But I do recognise that point around riparian ownership and responsibility and what happens when you don't have everyone responding to their responsibility in the same way. It is a challenge. And as we look to the future, we must ensure this investment continues to be targeted, effective and sustainable. But beyond the technical and financial considerations, we must also recognise the human dimension to flooding. Behind every statistic is a person, someone who has had to leave their home, someone who has lost possessions, someone who is worried about the future. Flooding affects mental health, financial stability and community cohesion. It can take months or even years for people to fully recover. This is why our response must be compassionate, comprehensive and long-term. We must also acknowledge the broader context in which these events are occurring. The increasing frequency and intensity of storms like Chandra and Ingrid reflect a changing climate. While no single weather event can be attributed solely to climate change, the pattern is clear. We are facing more extreme rainfall, more volatile weather systems and greater pressure on our flood defences. This reality demands that we strengthen our resilience not only through infrastructure, but through planning, community engagement and environmental stewardship. That's why protecting communities from dangers of flooding is a key priority of this government. This year has started with record-breaking rainfall, nearly twice the long-term monthly average in the southwest, which has been deeply challenging. Strengthening local and national coordination, ensuring that agencies, councils and emergency services can respond swiftly and effectively is crucially important. And as we were yesterday, listening to communities, valuing their lived experience and ensuring that their voices help shape future policy. This government's record investment in flood defences will better protect communities from flooding right across the country. Not only that, but it will boost economic growth in local communities by protecting businesses, delivering new jobs and supporting a stable economy in the face of increasing risk of flooding as a result of climate change. This government is committed to act and ensure that communities are better protected from flooding in the first place. We will continue to deliver and repair flood defences, improve drainage systems and develop natural flood management schemes. The emergency services, Environment Agency, local authorities, voluntary organisations and government departments stand ready as ever to support affected people in any future flooding event. It is a personal priority and privilege to be the Minister responsible for flooding, and I will continue working to make sure this government responds as effectively as possible to floods.
The question is that this House do now adjourn. As many as are of that opinion say aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. Order, order.